There was a moment on this beach in Dunkirk, France, when Hitler's dream of a conquered Europe was within his grasp. Not for just a few hours or for a few days, but for almost 2 weeks.
The Nazis called it a blitzkrieg, lightning war. In less than a year, they had vanquished virtually all of Western Europe. Only the shattered, retreating armies of Belgium, France, and England still opposed the German rush to conquest. On the run, the British fought a rear-guard action, pressed ever closer by the Nazis to the end of the road, the English Channel.
Here, pushed back to the sea, was all that was left of the British Army, tattered, defeated, surrounded by a vastly superior force. They huddled here in Dunkirk, waiting for the death blow. It never came. The Nazis had a noose around the neck of the British Army and did not spring the trap. Why did the Nazis hesitate? What were the elements that conspired to create this moment? Historians call it the miracle of Dunkirk. That phenomenal event will be the first stop on our journey into the strange, the bizarre, the unexpected.
Penetrate the shadowy world of ancient ritual. Behold a temple devoted to 100,000 rats. Explore a new Jerusalem carved out of a Brazilian wilderness and witness the awesome powers of Hindu mystics as they conquer excruciating pain. Discover Hitler's secret weapons that might have changed the course of history, and see outlandish machines conceived in the desperation of global war. Be deceived by some of nature's most accomplished quick-change artists. Explore the frontiers of modern art, a $12,000 load of bricks, a coastline wrapped in plastic, an enormous sculpture almost no one ever sees, and a Texas-sized monument to the tail fin. The strange, the bizarre, the unexpected. These are the kinds of subjects a man named Robert L. Ripley challenged us to believe it or not.
A little over 40 years ago, in the spring of 1940, the beaches at Dunkirk were the focal point of one of the greatest potential disasters in modern military history. Over 1/3 Allied troops were driven here, reeling from the Nazi onslaught that had conquered France in scarcely 2 weeks. The British, French, and Belgian troops had retreated until now on this beach, with their backs to the sea. They had nowhere left to run. The German high command considered them ripe for slaughter.
Packed within a narrow defensive perimeter, the British were virtually defenseless. They had abandoned their vehicles and many of their weapons and were a sitting target for the Nazis. Yet suddenly, inexplicably, the Nazi panzers came to a halt. Within range of their guns, almost the entire British expeditionary force could do nothing but pray for an impossible deliverance. The arrogance of Adolf Hitler was the instrument of Britain's salvation. The dictator accepted Reich Marshal Hermann Goering's assurances of an easy victory. The German army, Goering advised, should press on to Paris to prepare for Hitler's arrival. Paris, after all, was a prize of great symbolic value, while the annihilation of the British at Dunkirk would be no more than an exercise for Goering's proud Luftwaffe. Embattled British, the Nazi reliance on ineffective air power was the first in a series of miracles. Back home, another miracle was in the making. Manned mostly by civilians, one of the most unusual armadas in history set out for the sea, clerks, shopkeepers, and weekend sailors, ready to risk everything in a final gamble to save their desperate army in Dunkirk. With the arrival of the shallow draft civilian vessels, the survivors could begin an incredible march into the sea. Soon, the ragtag fleet was taking aboard as many as 53,000 passengers a day. When the rescue operation began, some experts had predicted that no more than 45,000 troops could be saved. They were wrong. In a miracle of deliverance, more than 338,000 soldiers were returned to the safety of England. Unknown to them, the survivors owed their lives as much to Hitler and Goering as they did to the determination of their fellow countrymen. For it was Goering's arrogant confidence in air power that had given the British time to rescue their army. Although expecting to be greeted with scorn, the defeated troops were welcomed as heroes.
For the British, Dunkirk set the stage for the triumph that would come 4 years later. Many of the troops who had been rescued from this beach returned to land on other beaches less than 200 miles from here at Normandy on D-Day, June 6th, 1944. There on the sandy stretches of shoreline, given the code names of Gold, Juno, and Sword, they claimed the victory that was born here in the miracle of Dunkirk. Believe it or not.
This I've...
A perfect illusion, but easy to explain. All you have to know is... But wait. The purpose of a trick is to deceive, to amaze, and amuse. To reveal the magician's secret is to destroy your pleasure in being astounded. And all of us enjoy being fooled from time to time. Don't we? Deception, however, has many uses other than magic. Sometimes it's necessary to deceive just to stay alive. For the military, success often depends on fading into the terrain. The rule is, they can't hit you if they can't see you. In World War II, General Blood and Guts Patton played a starring role in one of the greatest deceptions of the fight against Nazi Germany. In southern England, he commanded a decoy army. Apparent breaches of security let the Germans know that Patton's army was on maneuvers, but did not reveal that tanks were made of rubber and the guns of wood. All part of an elaborate hoax aimed at fooling Hitler about Allied invasion plans. Nature abounds in creatures with amazing abilities to disguise and deceive. Supreme among nature's quick-change artists is the cuttlefish. Together with its close relatives, the squid and the octopus, this little creature can display a rich variety of colors to suit both its mood and its environment. Hunting for food, the cuttlefish blends with its surroundings. A strike, and it changes color again, achieving a new look within seconds. Giving a chameleon a good look at itself in a mirror reveals that the lizard's famous color changes are not just for concealment. More often than not, the chameleon switches colors because of anger, fear, or sexual excitement. Which of those emotions is stimulated by the sight of itself in a mirror is, at best, uncertain. It takes sharp scrutiny to locate the moth on a tree trunk. The design on its wings, its coloration, the way it presses the edges of its wings against the tree bark make it blend neatly into its background. To a casual eye, these seem like torn leaf fragments quivering in the breeze. But a close-up lens reveals tiny caterpillars just trying to stay alive. Look carefully, and you'll see some of these twigs begin to move. They're phasmids, stick insects. Shaped and colored like twigs, they live in trees and usually are active only at night. To heighten their deception, they can put themselves into a cataleptic state, simulating death, and remain completely immobile for hours. It is evolution, not coincidence, that the insect which looks like a twig lays an egg which looks like a seed. Prominently displayed spots that look like eyes are a fairly common insect camouflage trick evolved to deceive enemies looking for a quick meal. This caterpillar's head is at its other end, pretending to be the tail. Many caterpillars display phony eye spots, but believe it or not, the Neola caterpillar can carry the deception to record heights by opening and closing the eyes on its tail. This makes for a rather frightening appearance to scare off hungry birds, while the other end goes on eating. What looks like a hollow reed or twig lying on the ground is really the heavily camouflaged tubular web of the purse web spider. When an unsuspecting fly lands on it, the spider must first locate just where the delectable meal is. Then it plunges its poison fangs through the web into the fly. And because an invitation to step into the parlor would have no effect here, the spider must cut a hole in the web and drag the paralyzed visitor inside. The meal consumed, the spider repairs the damage, setting the trap for its next unwitting victim. In human affairs, deception is regarded as less than honorable, unless you happen to be in show business or its very close relative, professional football. Deception, fake punts and field goal tries offer thrills few other plays can match.
Appearances, as we have seen, can be quite deceiving. Take this London street. It's called Leinster Gardens. Chummy little row houses shoulder to shoulder. But despite their almost identical facades, they are not all as they seem to be. Here at number 23, no one ever goes in or comes out of this door. No tradesmen, visitors, or even postmen ever call on number 23. The windows are never opened. The fact is, no one lives here because this is not a home. It's nothing but a wall dressed up with some wooden trim. A deception designed to fill a gap in this solid row of quiet English homes. And what's behind it? Well, that's hardly a secret to the people who live at number 22 and number 24.
For hidden behind the wall of number 23 is a tunnel and the tracks for a regularly scheduled train.
Number 23 Leinster Gardens, the house that never was. Believe it or not.
P.T. Barnum exhibited a mermaid constructed from the remains of a fish and a monkey, and people paid to see it. Believe it or not.
Welcome to Psych.
Not so long ago, respected critics of the day used some very disrespectful language to describe the work of a group of modern artists. Today, Auguste Rodin's Walking Man occupies a place of honor here in the Sculpture Garden at UCLA. But once it was described as a cadaver, the monstrous creation of a mind and soul tainted with sadism. And many of Rodin's contemporaries had to put up with similar insults. The visualized ravings of a maniac is what one writer said about the works of Vincent van Gogh, now acclaimed throughout the world as a towering genius. And Edward Degas' paintings were called disgusting and offensive. A shameful open sore, not worth exhibiting, described the works of Edouard Manet. And one critic said of Paul Cézanne, his painting recalls the designs that school children make by squeezing the heads of flies between the folds of a sheet of paper. All of which proves again that critics are fallible, that tastes do change, and that art, like beauty, is very much in the eye of the beholder. When London's celebrated Tate Gallery bought 120 bricks and had workers assemble them according to the artist's instructions, no one paid much attention. But 4 years later, a reporter poring over the Tate's catalog discovered that the purchase had cost $12,000. Reaction was swift and vitriolic. The assembly of 10 dozen simple, ordinary bricks is the work of Carl Andre, respected internationally as a serious artist. Andre has said, "There is no symbolic content to my work. A good work of art is a social fact." On several acres of wasteland near Niagara Falls, New York, artist Andrew Lester constructed 9 odd shapes of wood. They seem to be, at a first casual glance, a random abstraction. But from distant, differing viewpoints, a recognizable form emerged. Titled Diamond, the work was ideally meant to be seen from the nearby highway. In a remote and desolate corner of Nevada stands an artwork of staggering dimensions. 140 feet long, it took 4 years to build and cost $100,000, wiping out the life savings of the artist, Michael Heiser.
You can't trade this thing, you can't put it in your pocket. If you have a war, you can't move it around, it's not worth anything. The theory is that art and land are the things that have the greatest value.
Heiser says his earthwork will stand for more than 1,000 years and seems not to care that only a handful of people have ever seen it. Perhaps no modern artist has generated more publicity, or caused more furor, or attracted more money for his projects than Christo Yavachev, known simply as Christo.
Like that in our cover.
Oh, it'll be wonderful.
Over the years, he has raised millions of dollars from patrons who believe in his visions of art, wrapping trees and buildings in plastic, building a 24-mile-long fence in California, hanging a 1,200-foot curtain in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Christo's most massive work was wrapping 1 mile of coastline near Sydney, Australia. A largely volunteer force labored 17,000 hours, securing 1 million square feet of polypropylene to the rocky shore with 35 miles of rope.
More! Moving up there. It's completely moving up.
Christo has said that wrapping an object or obstructing a space actually creates an energy that is the most important part of his work and, he said, the most important part through all the period of modern art. The question, what is art, probably will never be answered to everyone's satisfaction. A case in point, Cadillac Ranch, 5 miles west of Amarillo, Texas. 10 Cadillac cars, half buried at exactly the same angle, they say, as the sides of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. The cars represent the model years between 1949 and 1960. The creators, Chip Lord, Hudson Marquez, and Doug Michaels, call it a monument to the rise and fall of the tail fin. While some people see Cadillac Ranch as a waste of 10 perfectly good cars, some critics have called it a whimsical artistic statement about America's obsession with the automobile. The automobile obviously provides artists with more than transportation. For some, it's art. For others, it's only a car. And there's a good reason for that. Because what unites artists is not a common point of view, but an uncommon way of selecting a viewpoint. Looked at one way, this is just another automobile. Looked at another way, it's, well, believe it or not.
Paintings produced by a chimpanzee were actually exhibited at London's Royal Festival Hall. Believe it or not.
Heartburn, diarrhea, nausea, indigestion, upset stomach. Heartburn, diarrhea, nausea, indigestion, upset stomach.
Pepto-Bismol, first aid for stomachs.
You've done the math and figured out that you can consolidate bills and still afford to make some home improvements. But the lenders tell you that you don't have enough equity. Hi, I'm Dan Marino. If this has happened to you, call First Plus Financial at 1-800-510-PLUS. They'll lend you up to 125% of the value of your home, less your first mortgage balance. There's no application.
It was history's most mechanized war. A war in which men were both guardians and servants of machines. On and under the seas, in the air and on the land, weapons of unprecedented power took their deadly toll. Weapons were paramount.
I'm standing on a weapon, a war machine that survived the onslaught of a determined enemy during World War II, that fought in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, that helped win the liberation of the Philippines. This is the aircraft carrier Intrepid. The men who served aboard her are no longer here, but their machines remain. Silent relics of a time when global war was an awesome, fearful reality.
World War II was won and lost in factories as much as on battlefields. In utmost secrecy, both sides conceived and tested new weapons. Some would remain secret for more than a generation. Hitler hoped to spearhead an invasion of England with Gigant, German for giant, a huge glider nearly as large as today's jumbo jets. Its 180-foot wingspan could lift 40 tons, tanks, artillery, or 200 fully armed men. The Gigant was so big and heavy that even with takeoff rockets, it required 3 tow planes to get it into the air. It was tricky and it was dangerous. Gigant was simply too big and cumbersome for its time. Months after Gigant's first flight, an American monster took to the air. The B-19, biggest airplane of its day. With a wingspan over 200 feet, the B-19 served as a flying laboratory, testing designs of engines and gun turrets. Only one B-19 was ever built. Gradually, its usefulness diminished, and in 1948, it was scrapped. Perhaps the most radical airplane design fostered during the war was the flying wing. Faced with the possibility of a British defeat, American military planners wanted an ultra-long-range plane that could bomb Germany from distant bases and return safely. John Northrop's wing seemed like an answer, but the war ended before the first one was ready to fly. Some projects were ludicrous. One British idea for the invasion of Europe, the Cape Hawk landing stage, required a platoon or so of men to leap into the waters that certainly would be mined, and then, under enemy fire, secure a mooring post to enable the waiting motorcyclist to lead the invading forces. Panjandrum was the code name for a giant wheel packed with explosives that could propel itself up the beach to the German positions. It's been said the wheel was just a hoax to make the Germans think the Allies would land on the hard, sandy beach at Calais. But a more likely reason it was not used was that its steering left much to be desired. Using retro rockets to drop supplies from airplanes without parachutes was another English endeavor. But the trials were somewhat disappointing. More successful was the flail tank, developed to clear mines from invasion beaches. In Normandy and other landings, it saved untold lives. The RAF organized a special squadron trained to use the bouncing bomb. Dropped from speeding planes only 50 feet above the water, the big balls skipped along the surface for about 1 mile before they hit the target. As early as 1941, the Germans had tested rocket-powered fighter planes. Their biggest snag was the fuel they required, a highly volatile mixture of dangerously explosive liquids. Just a few drops could cause a violent reaction, including spontaneous combustion when in contact with any organic material. Pilots had to wear a special acid-resistant suit. Without it, they could literally be dissolved by their fuels. Planes had an unbelievable rate of climb and a top speed almost twice that of Allied fighters. But their power was limited to only a few minutes in the air. Test pilot Hannah Reich flew the early rocket planes.
It was fascinating. It was like thundering through the skies, sitting on a cannonball, like being intoxicated by speed. It was not difficult to fly it. It was only an overwhelming impression. At the end of the airfield boundary, you already reached about 500 miles per hour, and with constant speed, you were climbing up in 1.5 till 2 minutes into a height of 30,000 feet.
Years before America and her allies had anything that could compete with it, Germany's rocket plane easily broke the world's speed record. It hit 623 miles an hour in level flight and came close to breaking the sound barrier. To this day, experts still question the effectiveness of large-scale daylight bombing raids against targets in Germany. American losses were heavy, and despite extensive damage, German production continued throughout the war. And what if the Nazis had been quicker to develop jet aircraft? As it was, the Me-262 was the world's first operational jet fighter. And when it finally saw combat, it took a fearful toll of American planes. German gun cameras recorded the ferocity of aerial battles at close quarters. The Germans had developed an air-to-ground guided missile that was years ahead of its time. Launched from a bomber and guided to its target by radio, it sank 5 British warships before the Royal Navy worked out a way to jam its guidance system. The Nazis even had a head start on atomic energy. But according to Hitler's production chief, Albert Speer, their own dogma kept them from developing the atomic bomb.
It's one of the ironies of history that the whole chances of Germany to have an atomic bomb were spoiled by the fact that Hitler considered the Einstein theories and the atomic research a Jewish physics, as he called it.
An irony of history, indeed. Had Hitler not turned his back on the atomic age because he wanted no part of what he called Jewish physics, London, not Hiroshima, might have been incinerated by the first A-bomb. Hitler sealed his doom and that of the Third Reich and ensured the safety and freedom of the Western world out of ignorance and raw prejudice. Believe it or not. A gun invented in Germany during World War II actually could shoot around a corner. Believe it or not.
This sci-fi.
For some people, the game of chess can be an obsession. The moves, the counter moves, the possible combinations are to them endlessly fascinating. To reach this point in a game, for example, players could have considered over 1 billion possibilities. And with each move, the choices increase. Every move triggers another move until, well, until the game is over. There is one game, however, that never ends. The complex, incredibly diverse contest we call life. It seems that no matter how many moves we make towards a final understanding of how the game of life is played, there's always one more surprise, one more move that we hadn't anticipated, that we didn't even know existed. Each year, high in the snow country of Japan, in the village of Nozawa, young men prepare for a baptism of fire. They are 25 years old, and because that is an inauspicious age, they must prove themselves worthy to be called men. They must build a sanctuary and defend it against fiery attack by the rest of their village. They'll be protecting men of another unlucky age, 42. In Japanese, the words 42 also mean to die. Over 1,000 years old, the Fire Festival of Nozawa reflects many of Japan's national values: respect for seniority, loyalty to friends, and the belief that despite modern advancements, traditions must be preserved. Burning torches, the rest of the village will attack the sanctuary, where the 42-year-old men protect a sacred altar. The 25-year-olds must safeguard their elders. After 2 hours of fierce fighting, the 42-year-olds leave their sanctuary and all gather round a bonfire to burn the sacred altar. Having survived their initiation, 25-year-olds will emerge from the ordeal recognized and accepted as men of Nozawa.
Mankind's devotion to his gods often finds exotic expression. In a desolate corner of northwestern India, a Hindu temple is dedicated to the nurturing and worship of a growing population of rats. Nearly 500 years ago, according to legend, Karni Mata, a holy woman, performed miracles of healing among the wretchedly poor people of the region. Before she died at about age 160, she said, "I shall be reborn as a rat." Thus the Temple of Rats was begun, and since that day, worshippers have made offerings of money to buy food for the revered rodents. The faithful believe it is an omen of good fortune if any rat should climb onto their heads as they bow in prayer at the altar. An estimated 100,000 rats live in the temple in pampered safety. Wire netting covering the building protects them from predators. The people scoff at fears that rats spread disease. In 1927, when plague raged everywhere in the region, believe it or not, there was not a single occurrence inside the Temple of Rats.
The state of Pernambuco has long been the poorest in all Brazil. Yet the people of one remote village have achieved a pride and dignity that belie their poverty. Life is no easier, but it has become richer and more human. It was the work of one man, Plinio Pacheco, who was driven by an ambitious dream. He would build, in the desolate countryside, a replica of Jerusalem as it was 2,000 years ago in the time of Christ. After studying the history of Jewish and Roman architecture, he had to teach the people how to cut stone, using local granite from surrounding hills. For 6 years they labored in the hot sun, and they built the walls of a new Jerusalem in Pernambuco. Pacheco had told his workers, "Long after you are dead, your craftsmanship will remain. 20, 30,000 years from now, your Jerusalem will still be standing." Pacheco's dream involved more than architecture. He wanted the construction not just for itself, but to serve as an authentic setting for his production of the Passion Play. Each year, the people who built his new Jerusalem become soldiers and disciples, Jews and Romans, officials and commoners, to reenact the most powerful legend of Western civilization. During rehearsals and performances, Pacheco is everywhere, supervising every detail of the elaborate production. A former Brazilian Air Force officer who married into a wealthy and influential family, Pacheco exercises his power over hundreds of villagers, much in the manner of a benign medieval Grand Duke. Every Holy Week gives the people a sense of pride and achievement, for they are involved in an act of creativity, commemorating the martyrdom of the Savior. Every year, Plinio Pacheco's lifelong dream comes true.
Perhaps no expression of religious fervor seems more strange to Western eyes than the ordeal of Hindu mystics. Among thousands of pilgrims to a festival in Sri Lanka are the revered few who have chosen to go beyond the limits of pain, beyond the world of the living. Does their trance-like state block out all pain? Or does their religious intensity enable them to endure it? Western science has no answers. Even as he prepares to be hung from hooks embedded in his flesh, the mystic appears serene. He has prepared himself for months. For the past 15 days, he has eaten no food, taken only water in order to enter a state of absolute purity. In his awesome state of bodily mortification, he will chant, "O marvelous Lord, you have granted me true and perfect rest." Believe it or not.
They call him the Prince of Darkness, Nosferatu, the Lord of the Living Dead. But to some, he's simply known as Dear Old Dad. Meet the 500-year-old legend and his descendants of evil in a 4-night film fest of bone-chilling terror. The legacy of Dracula continues tonight with Dracula's Daughter, beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern, part of a month of bloodlust on the Sci-Fi Channel. But right now, join Patrick McNee for Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles. Sci-Fi Channel next.